I've been having a lot of fun working on these obscure DOS videos, so why stop when on a roll? Let's see what's in today's. Seven Colors is a rather good one or two player top-down turn-based puzzle strategy mixture. All that said, personally I don't find it very fun when played against the CPU. It's so much better against another player. The game is played on a rectangular board filled with diamonds in 7 different colors. Players start at opposing sides of the game board and take turns picking colors. Whenever one is chosen, all the other diamonds of the same color bordering with player's territory are annexed, expanding his or her borders. And I'm sure that's enough for you to figure out what the objective is, right? Yep, you're right as usual, whoever controls more than half of the game board wins. But that's not all of it. There are some tactical quirks here and there that may turn the tide of the competition at any moment. For one, any color that one of the players picks is locked for choosing for another one for a whole turn, meaning it's sometimes best to block rather than attack, metaphorically speaking. Additionally, creating a line from one border of the board to another fills the space between them entirely. And finally, boards are randomized at start, coming with diamonds of various sizes and henceforth equally as varying strategic importance. There are also obstacle stones on the board, and they serve no other function than being annoying roadblocks. But since they're neutral, they are as annoying to your opponent as they are to you. Seven Colors is pretty fun with another player, especially that it includes a board editor, which means that there's some potential for tournament play between like-minded gamers. But against CPU, it's forgettable at best and pointless at worst. Deathbringer is a side-view action-adventure beat-em-up mixture. But first things first, the League of Wizards, awesome name I must add, so a group of evil wizards, forged a magical sword imbuing a demon's soul to it. They name it the Deathbringer. And they aim to use it to kill Karn the Barbarian, our protagonist. He, however, takes the sword for himself and plans to use it against its creators. The sword holding the demon's soul requires to be constantly fed, for the lack of a better word, to hold the demon within it. So, on your quest to find and kill the evil wizards, you need to kill monsters to keep the sword content and powerful. Deathbringer is composed out of 30 non-linear side-scrolling levels in which you unusually start in the very middle of, and can move both left and right freely and progress in a chosen direction. Defeating enemies and getting to the end allows Karn to fight the boss guarding the next stage. Saying that there's 30 levels is a bit of a misdirection, as they all are interconnected in multiple spots, letting you move between them. Overall, there's apparently over 600 screens in the game. That kind of sizing in a game other than top-down role-playing means nothing to me, however, and I cannot fathom how big it really is. Is it single screens? Or a singular side-scrolling sections? I don't know. Do you? It's big. Whatever. Anyway, there's no literal time limit to how long you have to complete the game other than having to kill the monsters and refill the sword. As if at any point sword fill meter empties, Karn will die. Deathbringer was originally developed for the Amiga and on the Amiga, and that's why it may look like something familiar to you if you had the system before and also carried that Amiga-like graphical design. Interestingly enough, one more thing transferred successfully from Amiga to PC, and looks stunning for the time, and its 36-level parallax scrolling background, which is fantastic. It was achieved using wedges instead of squares as tiles for it. It may not be as smooth on PC as it is on the Amiga, but it looks jaw-dropping. Arguably, Deathbringer's gameplay loop is not for everyone, but if you are such a person, you'll have a lot of fun. Cloud Kingdoms is a top-down action puzzler. But wait, it has a story. Evil Baron von Bonsai has stolen your collection of precious crystals, scattered them around 32 different kingdoms and left you to your own devices. Now, why was that story needed? I don't know, but it's there. And you, as Terrid, have to travel through the game trying to recover the crystals. Interestingly enough, Cloud Kingdoms doesn't use lives mechanic, so you can't lose by dying. Instead, it gives you approximately 400 seconds to complete the entire game. And each level you pass successfully supplements the counter with additional 80. If that was all, then Cloud Kingdoms wouldn't be too demanding and the 400 seconds would be more than enough. So, obviously there are numerous bodies and environmental dangers in your way. Enemies you gotta avoid, so that's that. But the hazards, oh my, there's so many. I mean, there are holes in the ground, and not all are visible at first. There are slippery squares, magnetic ones keeping you glued to them and unable to jump from, keys you have to find to open locked-off sections. There's a lot. Fortunately, you don't have to complete all 32 levels to quote-unquote win. The game is divided into 8 sections of few levels each in non-linear fashion, and you only have to complete 8 levels overall, picking one from each section. So, first 2 sections give you choice of 4 levels each. The next 2 only offer 3, 5th and 6th give you 2 to pick between, and the last couple have 1 stage each. So you have to go through them as they come. It's not entirely random, and you have some influence on what comes next, as the choices you are given are the leftovers from your earlier picks. So there's that. Every world is unique, featuring special blocks and enemies, so Cloud Kingdoms offers quite a decent degree of replayability. If there's one thing I feel that is missing from Cloud Kingdoms, it's VGA support, as it would have looked much better in high color mode. Clyde's Adventure is an unusual shareware platformer. Unusual because it doesn't feature any enemies. And I mean it, there's not a single one in the entire game. And it doesn't matter, as it's pretty decent without them too. It's divided into 32 levels, split into packs. First 16 available for free in the shareware version, and additional 16 unlocked with a purchase. To complete the stage and move to the next, you have to find and pick up all the treasures and gems in it. It's not as easy as it seems, as the levels are filled with environmental dangers, and touching grand majority of them kills Clyde instantly, so learning how to measure and time your jumps is crucial. Additionally, Clyde has an energy meter that's depleting as he walks, jumps and falls, so picking a correct route in those more demanding stages is a must. If you do learn them by heart, however, most levels are a breeze and shouldn't take more than a couple of minutes to complete. Interestingly enough, stages are unlocked in freeze, so if any in particular is too demanding for you, you can skip it, go through the others and come back to it later on with a fresh head. Now, I have beef with few design choices. Clyde's Adventure is not an easy game, and it's unlikely that you'll complete any levels other than the first few on a first go, and we'll have to not only learn the layout of them, but also all dangers and how to avoid them. It's part of the fun, but I would prefer a bit more forgiving difficulty curve, to be honest. What I have the biggest gripe with is the scrolling and animation though. Saying that it's jerky is an understatement. It's painful to watch for longer periods of time, at least to me, and I would suggest taking in the game in parts in between other titles. But it may be me, and it doesn't have to be an issue for others. I, however, have to make sure that some of those modern FPS titles run at least 60 FPS, cause otherwise, after a while, it becomes physically uncomfortable for me. Come to think of it, now that I said it aloud, it seems like a neurological issue. Oh well, whatever, it's a problem for another day. Clyde's Adventure is both fun and annoying, depends where on the Souls-like spectrum you find yourself on a particular day. But if it sounds like something you'd like, give it a go. It's a decent little game. Fistfight is a side-scrolling beat-em-up for 1 or 2 players. You can play as Dude, Ryu from Street Fighter lookalike, or a blonde girl. And for whatever the reason, they both keep pushing right, beating up hundreds upon hundreds of bodies. I'm not sure if there's any story to Fistfight, but there definitely is a full screen rotation with scrolling in the menu that's a vomit-inducing nightmare. And not because it's badly made, technically it's actually pretty impressive. It's because its frame rate is so slow that it's painful. But since we're on a speed, Fistfight itself doesn't know how fast it wants to run. It feels slow and fast at the same time. And get that, it also plays slow and fast at the same time. When there's nothing on the screen other than your character or characters if you're torturing someone else with this game too, their adult standing animations have just 2 states, so by extension of that, 2 frames. And they cycle between both constantly, which makes them look as if the game would run way too fast. On the flip side, when there's more than one enemy on the screen or some animated background objects, the game slows down to a near crawl. It's terrible. The Ryu-looking dude's moves seem to be carbon copy of his counterpart from Street Fighter 2, but the girl at least feels as if she was originally designed for the game. Pity, she's no fun to play. Scratch that. They both suck equally. The game features regular and special attacks and screen-clearing quote-unquote bombs. The enemies are generic and uninspired, and each of 7 levels ends with a boss fight. Graphics, other than the backgrounds, are pretty good, even if they're lacking what feels like hundreds of frames of animations to run smoothly. And the collision boxes are imaginary, because you never know if and where on the enemy sprite your punch or kick will connect. Fistfight is a chore, and I wouldn't recommend seeking it out, let alone playing it. Flying Corps Gold is a patched and expanded version of year prior's Flying Corps, and it's a World War I themed fly combat simulation. Flying is apparently the safest mode of transportation, or so they say, but when I think of those coffin-like WW1 planes, made in large parts of wood, strings and dreams, I feel like whoever's inside is literally a flying corpse, but with an E at the end. Oh well, we had to start somewhere to get to where we are today, technologically speaking. But my feelings aside, Flying Corps Gold being one of the early full 3D simulations is not bad at all. It supports all the major at the time accelerators under DOS and Windows, pretty decent graphics and accurate sounds. Flight model feels realistic, but not overly so you can still pull off some of those movie-inspired Daredevil moves when need arises. And the guns are appropriately heavy and clunky, as they would have been when front-mounted on a plane back then. So aiming and hitting anything with them requires getting used to, but when you do, it feels like a second nature. And most importantly, it's always fun to see those bullets tear through the olden paper planes. The selection of craft in the game from 1917-1918 is pretty wide, and they all feel different and unique when flying. Enemy AI is decent, if not great, and there's quite a lot of missions to complete, split into their respective campaigns. So, if you're in a mood to make your mark on some of the most famous World War I air battles, there was no better choice in 1997 than Flying Corps Gold. Fountain of Dreams is Electronic Arts' unofficial follow-up to earlier cult classic Wasteland, a post-apocalyptic adventure role-playing. And as sequels, even those unofficial go, this one's not bad. It's perhaps not good enough to be compared to the original, and that's probably why it remained mostly unknown, but if you get into its story, it's pretty playable in its own right. Fountain of Dreams takes place several decades after the bombs fell in Florida, a state that broke off from the mainland after devastating nuclear attacks that literally tore it off the continent. Inhabitants of the now island split into the opposing groups, whose differences deepened over the years of separation from civilization. Survival is constantly threatened by mutation that's slowly overtaking the life in Florida, and even more so, crazy and dangerous faction of so-called killer clowns, descendants of the former circus performers who were stranded in the remote state after the bombs fell. When killer clowns killed the only person knowing how to stop mutation from spreading, your group of survivors task you with a mission of finding and sourcing the cure for it. Sounds pretty cool, right? Sure, it may not be the best background story you've heard of, perhaps even today, but it's definitely something that's an excellent starting off point. Very similar to first Fallout with its waterchip / gag and all. If you played Wasteland, you'll feel right at home in Fountain, as everything is done similarly, and no wonder as it's running on the same engine. The game world, while rather small being an island, feels interesting, unique and alive. So some characters and enemies may only be present in certain locations at certain points of night and day. It's worth keeping that in mind, as they may have their own schedules. And it's important to point out that the mutations you're seeking cure for can affect others and your character too, so theoretically, no two playthroughs should be the same, with you getting different boons and buffs each time. There's obviously a lot of interesting and team-appropriate skills and items to acquire, and if you're an RPG nut, it's definitely a title to try out. Fountain of Dreams is not without its faults, however. First of all, it's rather small, the island and the game overall, and feels more like a standalone DLC to Wasteland rather than the full game. And secondly, and arguably more importantly, the difficulty curve of combat encounters ramps up quickly, so you gotta play smart and save often. Dino Jr. in Canyon Capers is a vertically scrolling platformer in which you play as Dino, who has to collect all the treasures in each level going either up or downwards. If it looks like a game you've seen before but something's not right and you can't put your finger to what, then perhaps a little game called Huckleberry Hound in Hollywood Capers will come to mind, cause they're identical other than the main character and setting. Anyway, as I was saying, in Canyon Capers you collect treasures for points, and when you grab them all, a level is completed. There's 5 of these in each of the 4 worlds, so a total of 20 stages to beat. Said worlds are creatively named as Underworld, Sea World, Canyon World and Sky World. So yeah, game writing at its finest. Not an issue, just an observation. There are obviously tons of dangers and hazards, alive or otherwise, so avoiding the creatures wandering the stages or avoiding falling rocks, spitting fire and little drops to name a few is a must. There are however health pickups in the form of hearts here and there, so grabbing them should help you on your adventure. Especially that there's no saves of any kind, and Canyon Capers plays like the best games of the 80s did, so from the beginning to an end, with no saves coming in between, all in one sitting. If you manage to complete Dino Jr. in Canyon Capers, you can carry on and replay it, but the game will be a tad more difficult for an added challenge, which is always nice if you're someone who likes to replay the same content for score. It's perhaps not the best platformer out there, but it can definitely hold your attention for a little while. Oh, and I almost forgot, there are bonus stages too, so there's that. Disc is a futuristic sports game for 1 or 2 players. The objective of the game, or the match, as you play single matches or championship against 16 opponents really, is to either defeat the opponent on the other side of the arena by hitting him with the thrown disc several times, or by removing floor from under him, destroying the walls behind him that mirror the floor tiles. That's simple, yes. But behind this perceived simplicity lies a pretty complex and fun strategically game. You can throw the disc at the wall to have it bounce off of it and go towards the opponent's side, or directly at him. Both have their uses. Be careful with throwing it directly at the crafty opponent or a CPU at higher difficulty levels, however, as they may catch the disc rather than be hit with it, and then they're in possession, which is not something you'd like to happen. On the flip side, you can catch the disc too, so there's that. This very simple gaming concept is surprisingly addicting when played against a friend, as it's a game that doesn't rely on your agility alone, and smart plays are rewarded too. The CPU skill differs along with its difficulty level, and while he's a noob at the lowest, at highest he'll be a real challenge. Graphics, while not mind-blowing, are nicely drawn and detailed, though pretty samey all throughout the game, which is a bit disappointing, and I would enjoy the players to be all differently styled. Kinda like Nintendo always does with their party games, sticking a dozen or so completely different characters in that all have their good and bad sides and special skills. Perhaps it's not necessary addition in a game like this, but would definitely be a welcome one, and would have extended game's replayability considerably. Sounds are, well, yes, they are. So they exist, but they're neither great nor bad, just there representing the on-screen action. So if you like odd sports and unusual playing games against others, Disc is a good pick. If you don't, then ignore it and jump straight into our next game. Elfland is a shareware adventure platformer divided in half, with first part subtitled Gorgimer's Castle and available for free, and second, The Troll Caves, unlocked via purchase. And the inspiration behind it is beyond obvious. It's clearly based off Commander Keen, both in terms of presentation and graphics. Well, business model too, but that's not as important. Story-wise, the trolls have invaded your homeland and you must seek out help of Gorgimer, the alchemist, in defeating them. He has a potion that could help against them, but getting to him and convincing him to part with it would be a task and a half. Nothing you can't handle though, but still not a piece of cake. You can play as either he or she, Elfie or Elfita respectively, but other than the different gender and looks, the characters don't have any unique to them abilities. The adventuring aspect of the game mainly focuses on conversations with different friendly NPCs, and you should do it as often as you find them, because they will not only reveal the plot, but will also serve you some useful gameplay tips every now and then. The enemies are plenty obviously, and there are a whole assortment of different creatures, from regular animals like birds or snakes, all the way to the oddities like jumping springs or pink bipedal balls with eyes and teeth. Weird stuff, man. And while they can't be killed per se, you can throw berries at them to stun them temporarily. There's few kinds of berries differing in color and how they work, so it's good to test them all out and learn their optimal usage scenarios. Graphics, as you can see, are not great, only using EGA, but they're easily distinguishable and you never have to wonder if something's a hazard, an enemy or a background. Sounds are terrible and honestly something that would be best left turned off if you ask me, but it may be more of a me issue than a general complaint. I'm Batman! What do you mean there's a lot of those me issues, Bruce? Sorry, he's in a mood today. Anyway, there is something I don't particularly enjoy in Elfland, and it's controls that use 9 separate keys on your keyboard, which is not much today in modern titles, but if you keep in mind how simple Elfland is, there was no reason for such complexity of controls. Other than that, it's a fun little game. Quite an interesting spread of genres we had today. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did, and that at least few of these were new to you. Either way, let me know what you think of them in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well, then there's thumbs down there too. But I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed, and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not, other than subscribing and hitting that bell, that is. And when you hit that bell, whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you a small and friendly notification about it, so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content, and also they get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. They're amazing and stars among the retro community. You will find names of their channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running, and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.